wanted to introduce myself. I'm Betty Gales in Charleston. This is my first call, so probably my
Welcome.
questions are elementary, but do all businesses, if you have a business sale, does it have to go through EXP?
If you're with EXP and you want to do business sales, then you are required to be with EXP Commercial. And if you're with EXP Commercial, that still doesn't let you do business sales unless you have a business broker addendum to your independent contractor agreement. And then they have some other requirements. So you have to join the IBBA, you have to take some courses, and they connect you with a business broker mentor to help you through your first few deals. And the reason for that is because business transactions are fairly complicated, or at least they can be, depending on the business. And there is a much higher liability associated with business sales than there is with selling property. Part of that is because with property, it's you have title companies, you have inspections and things like that people have. You have you have regular disclosures and things. With business sales are valued based on every business is unique, right? And so you could have two liquor stores on opposite corners of the same intersection, and one could be worth $1 million and the other could be worth 200,000, right? Well, and why, right? So when it comes to real estate, you're going to have, houses within a given block are going to be roughly the same value for the most part. I mean, some of them could have improvements and that'll give them, increased value. Some of them could be on bigger lots that'll give them increased value, but it's fairly evident. You can see a lot more of what's what. So businesses, you're dealing with intangible assets. You also don't, when you're dealing with privately held companies, privately held businesses, there's no reporting requirements other than to the IRS when buyer and seller file their tax returns. So it's harder sometimes to really understand the value of the business and to see what's there. And so there's a lot more due diligence that has to be done. There's just a lot of complexity to it. And as a broker, you have to do a reasonable amount of preliminary due diligence up front so you can even price the business, right? Because if your way of selling a business as a business broker is to just ask the seller, well, how much do you want for it? And then go market it. I mean, you would never do that with property, right? So it makes sense that is not the appropriate way to market a business either.
Sorry.
The liability is high. Also, the smaller the business, the higher the liability, because your smaller businesses, you have first-time buyers who are investing their entire life savings into buying this business for $120,000. And they've never been a business owner. They don't know how to, So what can happen is, I saw this with a nail salon, right? This woman wanted to buy or maybe it was a hair salon, I don't know. This woman wanted to buy a salon. She was investing her entire life savings into it. The landlord wouldn't approve the lease. So she wouldn't approve her as far as transferring the lease because she didn't have enough money, right? She didn't have a high enough net worth. So she made a deal with the sellers to partner with them. And, they formulated some LLC and all that. And then she was supposed to run the business. But there were all kinds of things that hadn't been disclosed. And so, of course, when when she went and got an attorney, because the business failed and the sellers had taken off and left her to run the business. So she didn't have the capital to continue marketing and all of that. She didn't have the capital to pay the rent, which is what the landlord was worried about. So she ended up losing the business. She turned around, sued the sellers for fraud and, misrepresentation, all kinds of other things. But of course, here in California, every attorney, for the most part, is going to say, oh, there was a business broker involved. Let me go sue the broker. Now, mind you, in this particular case, the broker had not even been involved in the transaction, because once the lease assignment failed, the broker walked away. It was like, okay, we're done here. You can't get the lease. You can't close the transaction. Broker never got paid anything else. But the buyer's attorney sued the broker anyways for fraud, right? Which, again, all the broker did was grab paperwork, financials from the seller and give them to the buyer and say, hey, this is what the seller gave me to give to you, type of thing. So there's a lot of that can happen in business sales. And like I said, just the smaller the transaction, the higher the liability. If you're selling a $2 million business or a $3 million business, there's attorneys involved on both sides. There's CPAs involved on both sides. The buyer's CPA is helping with the due diligence. And you as the broker, you have so much less liability, unless you're actually trying to do pro forma P&Ls or something on behalf of the seller, which you wouldn't do, or at least I highly recommend you don't do. I mean, you have next to no liability to worry about. So it's always, and it's easier to sell a $3 million business than it is to sell a $200,000 business. So much easier because the people involved are more sophisticated. They understand business. There's financing involved. There's a lender that's pre-qualifying a buyer. So again, you have all these other people that are involved in this transaction, which, yeah, it can get a little messy and they can make or break deals sometimes if you have the wrong types of attorneys. But in general, it also protects you as the broker, because the buyer can't say, hey, I was relying on the broker. Now I was relying on, my CPA, my attorney, whatever, and my own business background and experience, right? Because the lender's not going to loan $2.5 million to somebody who they don't think is going to be able to operate the business. So yeah, so it's these micro businesses that can end up in court and get you in trouble.